For most of modern American history, retirement was treated as a certainty rather than an achievement. It was not framed as something that required exceptional strategy or financial sophistication. It was simply what came after work. You spent decades employed, reached a certain age, and stepped away. That expectation shaped how people understood adulthood itself. Today, that assumption is quietly breaking down. Not because people stopped working hard, and not because society forgot how to plan, but because the economic conditions that once made retirement achievable have changed in fundamental ways. What makes this shift dangerous is that many people are still planning as if the old system exists. They assume that consistency, discipline, and time will naturally lead to stability. But the structure that once rewarded those traits no longer operates the same way. Retirement did not become unrealistic suddenly. It became unrealistic gradually through changes that transferred risk, raised essential costs, and reduced predictability, all while expectations stayed largely the same. For much of the 20th century, retirement in the United States rested on a simple foundation. Workers were not expected to be financial experts. They were expected to stay employed, show up consistently, and remain with one organization for long periods. In return, many received pensions that provided a predictable income for life. Wages generally rose over time, making saving easier as careers progressed. Social Security existed as a supplement, not the main source of income. Housing often became cheaper with age as mortgages were paid off and expenses stabilized. That system assumed stability across several dimensions at once: stable jobs, rising real wages, and declining expenses later in life. When those conditions hold, retirement planning does not require precision. It requires time. What changed was not people's willingness to work, but the environment surrounding that work. One of the most important changes was the disappearance of traditional pensions in much of the private sector. Over several decades, defined benefit pensions were replaced by individual retirement accounts such as 401ks. This shift moved responsibility and risk from employers to workers. Retirement income stopped being guaranteed and became dependent on market performance, contribution timing, and investment decisions. Under this model, outcomes vary widely, even among people who do everything right. A strong market near retirement can make a plan appear successful. A downturn at the wrong moment can permanently damage it. This is not about effort or intelligence. It is about exposure to risk that used to be shared and is now carried individually. At the same time, saving has become harder. While overall economic output has grown, wage growth for many workers has lagged behind the costs that matter most. Housing takes up a larger share of income than it did for previous generations. Healthcare costs have risen steadily. Education expenses now follow many people into adulthood as long-term debt, reducing their ability to save during the years when compounding matters most. Saving requires surplus, and surplus has become less common. This creates a structural constraint that common advice often ignores. Telling people to save more assumes discretionary income exists. For many households, financial decisions are not about optimization, but about trade-offs. Retirement saving competes directly with rent, medical bills, childcare, transportation, and debt payments. When basic stability is fragile, long-term planning becomes vulnerable. Inflation adds another layer of difficulty. Its impact is rarely dramatic in a single year, but over decades, it erodes purchasing power. Money that appears stable on paper can quietly lose real value. Conservative strategies meant to preserve capital often struggle to keep up with rising costs. Even moderate inflation can undermine retirement plans built on long-term price stability. As other supports weakened, reliance on Social Security increased. Social Security was designed to replace only a portion of pre-retirement income, not to serve as the primary source of support. Yet for many retirees, it now functions as exactly that. Average benefits are modest relative to modern living costs, especially when housing and healthcare are included. When a system designed as a supplement becomes a lifeline, even small strains matter. Healthcare is one of the most destabilizing factors in retirement. Even with Medicare, retirees face premiums, deductibles, prescriptions, and uncovered services. Long-term care, which is largely not covered, can cost thousands of dollars per month and often arrives unexpectedly. Medical expenses tend to rise precisely when income flexibility disappears. A single, prolonged health issue can undo decades of careful planning. Housing introduces similar uncertainty. Earlier generations often entered retirement with paid-off homes, reducing monthly expenses and shielding themselves from rent increases. Today, many approach retirement still carrying mortgages or renting indefinitely. Even homeowners face rising property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs. Housing no longer guarantees stability in retirement. It introduces ongoing exposure to rising expenses. These pressures affect generations differently, not because of attitudes or effort, but because of timing. Many baby boomers benefited from affordable housing and stronger wage growth earlier in their careers, but faced pension loss and market risk later in life. Generation X entered adulthood during a transition period, experiencing weaker job security and multiple recessions during peak earning years. Millennials faced high education debt, expensive housing, and unstable career paths from the start, making retirement feel abstract rather than inevitable. Generation Z has grown up watching these patterns unfold, often questioning whether traditional retirement will exist at all. Across generations, the pattern is not personal failure, but structural erosion. Each cohort entered a system that offered less support than the one before. The narrative of individual responsibility often hides this reality. Common advice frequently fails because it assumes conditions that no longer apply. Investing is necessary, but it works best under stability, uninterrupted employment, consistent contributions, and decades of favorable timing. Many people do not have those conditions. There is also a timing risk. Losses near retirement matter far more than gains earlier in life. Markets may recover, but retirees may not have the time to wait. The psychological effects of this environment are increasingly visible. When the future feels uncertain, behavior shifts toward the present. Spending becomes a way to maintain control. Long-term sacrifice feels less rational when the payoff appears unreliable. This is often framed as irresponsibility, but it is more accurately understood as adaptation to uncertainty. As a result, retirement itself is being redefined. For many, it will not mean a complete exit from work. It will mean continued income in some form, reduced hours, flexible roles, or gradual transitions. This is not inherently negative, but it is fundamentally different from the promise that shaped expectations for decades. The risk lies in planning for a past reality while living in a new one. Understanding why traditional retirement is becoming unrealistic matters because denial reduces options. Systems change long before expectations do. Recognizing that shift early preserves flexibility in how people plan, adapt, and define security. If you want a deeper analysis of economic structures and how they shape real lives across generations, subscribe to the channel. Clarity does not guarantee comfort, but it does preserve choice.